Hi everyone, it's Rachel Gerber here, Denominational Minister for Youth and Young Adults for Mennonite Church USA, and also the editor of The Gathering Place, which is an online community for Anabaptist youth leaders to learn via Connect. And you can join the Gathering Place community at www.thegatheringplace.us. Every month at The Gathering Place, we focus on a new theme, and everything we do throughout the month hinges upon this theme. And so today, in this podcast, we have been talking about sexual abuse prevention this month, and I'm thrilled to have Nancy Kauffman, who is part of my team at the Leadership Development Office with Mennonite Church USA, who has been working very closely with sexual abuse, misconduct prevention. And Nancy, welcome to the Gathering Place podcast today.
Well, thank you, and hi to everyone who will be listening to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for taking some time today to talk with us about this. And as we get started, do you want to give us a little bit of background or tell us about these projects that you're working on through the office?
Okay, the one project that we have been working on since 2014 was an update of the document Ministerial Sexual Abuse Policy and Procedure. Misconduct. Okay, sorry. Ministerial Sexual Misconduct Policy and Procedure. I only got it right. It was developed in 2000 by some church leaders back then, and it was the first policy and procedure put into place to deal with sexual misconduct or other ethical issues of pastors within the Mennonite Church. In 2014, Karen Martin Zimmerly from Mennonite Church Canada and Terry Hsu, Director of Leadership Development, and myself began this process of updating the policy and procedure. We felt that it had worked well for us on the whole, but over 14 years, there's a lot of things that we have learned and wanted to improve and update the policy procedure. I can go into some of those things that we particularly were wanting to deal with. Do you want me to do that?
Well, why don't you tell us first about why it's important to have a policy and procedure in place?
Mm-hmm. Well, what happens, and when I first began my ministry, I've been in ministry now for 35 years, and I remember serving on a ministerial leadership committee within our conference when we had two major complaints against two major leaders in our conference, and there was no policy and procedure to put in place, and so we were having to invent the wheel. And we discovered that when you do get an accusation towards the pastor, that is a high anxiety time, both for the pastor, for the complainant, the victim of the accused, for the congregation, like, how dare you question our wonderful pastor that we love, and then others saying, how could you possibly let this person continue on in ministry? And so to have a fair and balanced procedure and a very clear procedure that is consistent no matter who is being accused of the abuse, and so that the pastors know that if there's an accusation, there is one document that guides that whole thing. For complainants to know very clearly what is going to be the policy and procedure if I put this complaint out there. And then also, I think, too, if you don't have a policy and procedure in place, or if you have a policy and procedure in place and don't follow it, that could affect you legally in the future. So having that policy in place with the best wisdom that we have right now as a denomination for dealing and investigating is a safety for everyone.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about these procedures or policies? So for instance, let me just put an example out there. Let's say I'm a youth pastor in a congregation, and a youth confided in me that they've been sexually abused by their lead pastor. What do I do as that would be also an issue of power with my supervisor. Who do I go to, or what would be that?
If it is a minor, and you say youth, if it's a minor, then you need to report it to your state or local agency. You are required to. Now, some states don't require it, but Mennonite Church USA says whenever there's a minor involved, we want you to report it whether your state requires it or not.
To the police.
And you're not, when you're reporting, you're just saying, I have received this. You're not having to do the investigation yourself. You're not having to substantiate whether it's true. But if you received it, that's all you're giving. You're passing on information of something you received, and then they take it from there. And if it is against your supervisor, I would immediately, after you called, state or local authorities, that you immediately report it to your conference minister. And that will help to protect you against your supervisor in one sense. It may not completely protect, but at least you've got somebody in your back court who has an understanding of this procedure and policy. And so you're doing the right thing. You're doing the moral thing.
Yeah, I think that's really important to highlight too, is that especially in dealing with minors, to go to the local authorities, versus trying to figure out the next whatever down the road, but it's immediately, how to do this mandatory reporting for safeguarding. Absolutely.
And I would add another scenario to what you just asked. Say there has been somebody in your youth group and they have graduated, and they're past minimal, or what's the word?
They're 18.
Minor. They're not a minor anymore. Right. But they have now, they're in college and they have confided in you that the pastor did something to them 4 years ago. Well, okay, you must immediately report that to your conference minister. We don't care. That's one thing within the new policy and procedure, is that it doesn't matter if it is going on now, and if it's a pastor who no longer is in your church and they say, well, Bill Smith did this to me, still you must report it to your conference minister, because we say whether the person, if it's a pastor in your congregation, whether they are credentialed or not credentialed, whether they're alive or dead, whether they're still in the assignment, whether they are a pastor who gave up all their credentials, because that's one way perpetrators get around the system to say, well, I've given it up, so how can you come back to me? This new policy stresses it doesn't matter. It needs to be reported. So don't worry. And if you report it and you get some feedback later from someone, that why did you report that, you as a youth pastor or associate pastor can say, we are required by our conference to do that.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely needed. Absolutely needed. Yeah. Well, can you tell us, just to shift a little bit from the reporting to, as a pastor, what do you suggest in terms of creating good, healthy boundaries for us in a ministerial position to hopefully not ever be in a position of misconduct? Do you have any words regarding creating healthy boundaries for us as ministerial people?
Well, yes. One is, and hopefully you maybe had a chance to do that earlier before you actually got an assignment. But if you have not had a chance to do that, I like to use the phrase, make sure you clean out your closet. And when I say that, what I mean is, if you have been a victim yourself at one time by an abuse, but you've never told anybody, you've never dealt with what that has done to your heart, mind, and soul, I would beg you to get counseling immediately. That's a strength, to get counseling on that, to deal with that. Because, and the reason I say, if you don't deal with what you had happen to you internally, you may think you can keep it secret. But if you ever have to deal with an individual who comes to you and say, I have been abused by such and such a person, and you've now got to follow through up on this, that brings up your own issues. And you have to be very careful that your story and your issues don't overtake the person who's reported that they have been abused, so that you do not re-victimize them, because suddenly you're putting your story on top of them. Gotcha. And I've seen that happen so many times. I cringe. And the other thing that I would say too, in cleaning out your closet, if you are having issues of pornography or anything like that, again, do not think that you can keep it quiet or under control, because you might be able to keep it under control for a while, but if you want to have some documented stories, I wouldn't use the names, but I can tell you a number of pastors who ended up no longer in pastoral ministry because they crossed the line and they thought they had been controlling their issue very, very well. And so get help as soon as you can. Get counseling from somebody who really knows about pornography, not just any counselor, but someone that really can deal with that, or if you have other tendencies. And I would say, I would, again, talk to your conference minister to ask them to help, you deal with that. If it would ever come out, especially if you have pornography issues, children, if that's where you are with your pornography, then I would probably encourage you to step away from ministry. Just be up that front. You don't, please don't. Continue on. So that is, I call it cleaning out your closet. This next thing then I would say that is helpful for pastors is to make sure if you are married, make sure that you and your partner's relationship is in a good place. And attend to that, because I've seen too many situations where a pastor, the spouse, and they are having a struggle, and instead of really dealing with it, suddenly they seek out somebody from the opposite gender to confide in. And if you are ever confiding in someone first over your spouse, then that tells you your relationship is in trouble. And so paying attention to that. The other is that I would say, make sure that you have a healthy balance between your work, your home, your physical well-being, and your spiritual well-being. Even having a hobby that you can do on your day off that is totally different. I don't know, painting houses. I don't know what it could be, but anything, crocheting or knitting, anything. But making sure that you have a good balance, because I think it is so easy. It's so easy for you to either get burned out or so close to the line of burnout and you don't really realize it. And I will give a testimony to that. About a month ago, I was so close to burnout dealing with sexual misconduct issues that I didn't catch it and suddenly realized the way I was acting out. And so, boy, I took a vacation immediately. I talked to someone to help keep me accountable. I did a number of things to help bring me back to being centered in that. And that I'm telling you that, and I've been in ministry for 35 years, and I've talked about this, and still it is so easy to get to the edge and not realize it when the intensity is high. And when you're having to deal with abuse cases in your congregation or whatever, that intensity, you cross the line sooner than you think you do. You think the boundary is way out there, and it's a lot closer to you than you think that you might be crossing.
And I think another thing is when you aren't able to articulate what you like to do for play, that's probably a red flag too, that you need to invest a little bit more in playing in your life, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take dancing lessons or I don't know, take cooking lessons. It's amazing what you can do. And it is amazing when you push yourself out into some of those other areas. It makes for good stories later in your sermons and what you learn in that new hobby or whatever. It helps to stretch your mind and in good ways. I would say the other thing too is take training on understanding abuse, effect that it has on victims, an understanding of perpetrators, an understanding on grooming, and allow yourself to take more, even though you've taken one session or two sessions on boundaries, take more sessions on that. I think especially the boundary, I think where we have been caught in the Mennonite church a little bit is that, okay, so long ago we had an understanding of boundaries. Well, now with social media, texting, blogs, you name the situation, that has increased. We have not understood. I would say we as a church have not understood. I am all for technology, and believe me, I will try to get the latest of the latest, although I'm slowing down. I'm trying to get the latest of the latest because it's always more expensive. But I am always interested in technology, and it's going to be here to stay. But how do we use it in light of our faith? And I think there have been individuals who have been caught because of that. And here's another one. When I talked earlier about making sure that you're healthy with your spouse, I can't tell you how many individuals that I have become aware of who have developed relationships with persons of the opposite sex. And I keep saying the opposite sex, obviously if you're not, if you're into LGBTQ, then it would be someone of your own sex. But the idea that you can develop this relationship with this individual and that it's not having an affair. We need to expand our understanding of having an affair. And I move the having an affair all the way back to when you want to tell somebody first before your spouse about something good or something bad that's going inside of you, and you have somebody in mind quickly that you go to because your spouse, in quotes, doesn't understand. Well, of course I'm never going to understand because you don't share it with them. But then that's having an affair. So that's my definition.
I think that's helpful. I think that's really helpful. And those were some really clear ways that we can work at creating good, healthy boundaries in our own life. So thanks for that. Our time's almost up, Nancy. And I just have a final question is what do you want every church worker or church leader to know? What do you want to say to them regarding sexual abuse, misconduct, prevention? What's your final word? We've worked with this a long time now, and we're so grateful for this important work, but we do recognize it is challenging. But what do you want to say to everyone? Don't
be naive as a congregation that it can happen in your church. Some of the things I said earlier, make sure that you truly understand. I mean, in particular, and I'm hitting this pretty hard right now, is understanding the behaviors of perpetrators. I wrote an article for on Mennonite USA website back in May that talks in general about perpetrators, and I wouldn't, I'm not trying to promote myself, but
we'll link it. We'll link it to this one. Sure.
Yeah, I think it's pretty important, and that is just skimming the top of that, because I've seen the damage that it has done to individuals. And the other thing is have a healthy understanding of grace, forgiveness, accountability, confronting, and empower yourself to be bold, to do the morally right thing. I think when we say in our prayer, the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we pray that daily. And you as a pastor, you're entrusted with these youth and young adults in your midst, and thinking about, you want to have a healthy understanding of what's going on. You want to have youth. You want to empower your youth to be able to stand up for themselves in good ways, and to understand that God does not intend for anybody. There's no justification in our theology for abuse. And one thing I would say quickly is, the people who have the hardest time coming victims to moving to survivors to thrivers, who have the hardest time to move through that process, are those who have been abused by someone they know, and particularly someone within the church, because oftentimes that leader will use theology to keep this individual in place so that they continue to abuse. And so they are tainting the understanding of God. And so, please be aware of that. Cheap grace, no one, here's another thing I'd like to say. If you have somebody who says they admit to an abuse issue, you confront them about it, and they say, oh, yes, I did, but I am sorry, and I'll never do it again. Often the perpetrator will use that. Well, so then that means you need to forgive and forget. There is no such word as forget. I don't mean, you've got to follow through with accountability. They got to be willing to be accountable. And once somebody has abused a child, it's never a one-time thing. Never a one-time thing. It's addictive to them.
That's terrible. Yeah, well, I'm very grateful for the work that you're doing on your denomination. Like I said before, it's hard work, but it's necessary work. And I, for one, am grateful for the work that you're putting forth in this to remind us and to create a healthier church and a God-honoring church. So thank you so much, Nancy, for your time today on the Gathering Place, and continued blessings to you, and power and energy and strength, and may you recover that zeal again. So thanks again, and until next time, Gathering Place, thanks a lot.
Okay, blessings to everyone.
Thanks.